Good evening, folks. Welcome back. Here we are once again with DeFi Collective. My name is Robert Vaughn. This is Alex Jewell, and we're here to discuss anything and everything that has to do with decentralized finance. Today, we're gonna cover the societal implications of DeFi or decentralized finance, all including the economic implications and the sociological implications. As we all know, a financial system is also a political system. Capitalism is also a political system. Slavery was a political system. Mercantilism, feudalism, manorialism were all political systems as well as economic systems. So it's kind of hard to separate the two. And I think, a lot of times, when I talk to people, all they want to know is, should I get ETH now? Or how high is, Aave going to go? Or what is this going to do? And it's okay to make money, but I think, DeFi, decentralized finance, blockchain, cryptocurrency, and surveillance capitalism have implications that a lot of times don't get discussed or shared. So what we want to do today is talk a little bit about some of the societal implications. And, I just want to start out by saying that one of the things I think that decentralized finance and blockchain does, it kind of, it reverses the ownership, of a lot of things. For instance, when you can make your own investments, you take the middleman at the investment company or the bank, you take them out of the picture. And it also reverses wealth distribution. We haven't really had what I would consider successful wealth distribution. In the 40s and 50s, we had this middle class, or, in the 60s and the 70s, where a lot of people were doing very well. The American dream was achievable. You could go to college on a GI Bill. Everybody, if you worked at Ford, you could afford a house. And this has kind of been reversed, and it's not so much that way anymore. A lot of people often say, well, hey, the middle class is going away. Which is, I think it's true, the middle class is definitely shrinking. Nobody will argue that. But if the middle class shrinks and continues to shrink, then the people who produce, the producers, are not going to have anyone to sell their goods to. And eventually they may have all the money, but they're not going to have the money for long because the economic system is not going to be around. So, as we talked about previously, every 300 to 400 years, we get a different economic system. You had feudalism, and then manorialism, and then mercantilism, then slavery. Slavery was an economic system. It was the monetization of labor is what it was. And that's the thing about capitalism. When you look at the monetization of labor, and the way you become more efficient is you pay less money and you charge more for your goods. But the people that are working, if they can't afford to buy your goods, then that presents a problem. And what Henry Ford did by paying his workers $5 a day at that time was probably about 5 times as much as the going rate. They were able to buy the cars that they produced. And that in turn created a lot of robust economic activity that lasted for a long time, and that's kind of been reversed, with the advent of moving from the gold standard to the data standard. The wealthiest people now aren't so much the producers, unless you're producing oil, but it's the investment bankers. That's who's got all the money now. So I'm going to let Alex talk a little bit and kind of kick us off here about some of the more, prominent societal implications of decentralized finance.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. The history of our economic systems, especially in this country, is so important to understanding why decentralization is so important and how we've ended up in this situation. I think a lot of times we really look at just the frame we're in, right? We kind of have this idiom of like, you better know history so you don't repeat it. And ultimately, what we end up doing all the time is repeating history. And so here we are in this situation again, where you have a bunch of people at the top who have taken control over the political system to the extent where it is no longer regulating them properly. It's no longer taxing them fairly. And what's happening is we're again seeing the loss of that middle class. And the difference, though, in this situation from previous ones where there were, refreshes to that system, there were revolutions, there were changes that had to occur, whether it was because of war or because of actual revolution or things like that. The difference now is that the types of technological changes we're looking at are not in our favor. It's not in the favor of the workers. And so we're approaching the situation where the worker may have no leverage at all, right? And this is a terrifying, type of dystopian future that we don't want, where you still have the same, handful of tech giants at the top, but their workforce is fully automated. And you end up in the situation again where 1% own everything, and the rest of us, the 99%, are fully dependent on everything that they own. And this is a very, people end up living in squalor and things like that. And so, what we want to ensure is that people have the right types of wealth distribution, that people have the right types of access to things that they need, because I think it would be extremely disappointing if we end up in the future with the ability to, release nanotechnology in the body and travel to other planets and you maybe even settle on other planets. We reach that level of success as a human species, but we still can't feed the people that are hungry. We still can't pay people a living wage. I think that'd be like super disappointing. And ultimately, something like decentralization gives us the perfect tools for reversing that flow of wealth distribution. Reversing that flow of ownership so that people can own their data again, which is ultimately, like we've talked about plenty of times before, it's the gold of the modern era. It gives you ownership over your own finances, not having to deal with unfair centralized gatekeepers who decide if you're worthy enough or not to use their services or to have banking systems and things at your disposal. Even the ability to invest and save, these are things that, I think a lot of people take for granted. The ability to have like a savings account or to have Social Security, to have retirement. And they're not things that we're going to take for granted for much longer, because they're things that may ultimately disappear altogether if we don't make critical changes. And so that sort of decentralization recreates those systems for the future. It reverses that flow of wealth distribution, and it allows that people to have ownership over themselves and their finances and their success in a future situation where, where it doesn't have to be as dystopian, right? Where we can have a successful society despite changes in terms of what we consider valuable, what we consider hard work. Those things are going to change significantly. But what should change the most is our ability to create that new system, that new society, to design it proactively and intelligently, so that it's better than the one we had before.
And I think at the basis of what people desire is, you look at any movement, and it's all a question about fairness.
Yeah.
I think people understand it's, many people are going to be more entrepreneurial and are going to make a little more money. And some people are satisfied with not enough money. But I guess, you ask yourself the question, how fair is the system? Because now we're relying more and more on government handouts. People don't look at PPP loans, the forgivable loans, as government handouts, but it's government welfare.
Mm-hmm.
Enhanced unemployment is government welfare. We're depending upon the government. Enhancing food stamps is government welfare. And it's necessary because there's something about the system that's not working properly. And it has to do, I think, with wealth distribution.
Yep.
I mean, if you look, you look back in the 50s and 60s and in the 70s, you know, you could go out any day of the week and get a job, and you could earn enough money, one person, to support a family and buy a car and buy a house.
Yeah.
It's not like that anymore. Even with two people working two jobs, sometimes it's still hard to make ends meet.
Yeah.
You know, so we've been depending more and more on the government, and I think, you know, a lot of industry has kind of pushed people that way. I know, I think about the, you know, the Walmart videos, you know, teaching people how to sign up for food stamps. Well, here's a novel idea: pay them enough money where they can afford to buy food. You know,
Right.
and you know, like they, you know, we hear a lot of talk about the $15 an hour wage. And I mean, it boggles the mind that you have people in decision making positions who say that $15 an hour is too much. You know, I mean, that's just, you know, that's hard to believe, you know. But we have people, and I think one of the problems that I see, one of the challenges is that I think um, term limits eliminate a lot of things because people stay in office for so long.
Yep.
And they become so wealthy that they're sort of detached, you know,
Yeah.
from reality. You know, it's like I can remember, you know, when I was younger, you know, I grew up in Detroit. I lived in Detroit, and you know, a lot of the pro athletes, and you know, Smokey Robinson, Diana Ross lived two streets over. The Temptations lived around there. You know, so in the neighborhood, all the big celebrities were still people of the neighborhood. Well, now, you know, they live in gated communities, you know, and there are a lot of people, not just, you know, political people, but celebrities, they're kind of detached from the real world, I think.
Yeah.
You know, and when you have money, it's easy to really get detached because, you know, if everybody else is in a food line and you don't have that problem, then it's hard for you to really identify with it.
You have sort of an abstract idea of what that is,
Yeah,
but
you have an
don't
abstract, oh, it's
actually know.
awful to be hungry, but you haven't actually been hungry.
Right.
So I think, you know, we just, you know, with our economic system, we keep having these resets and these issues. You know, I think I don't want to say it started, but I think it's accelerated in 1970 when, you know, we went off the gold standard.
Mhm.
And so that really did something to the value of the dollar. And they said, well, how are people going to afford to buy things? He said, well, credit, we'll give everybody credit. And that's when you really started seeing credit, you know, late 60s, early 70s. I remember if you were in college then, you know, they sent you a credit card. Everybody got a credit card because they wanted
Free
to get
money, right?
yeah. You know, I was like, oh, this is great, man. Credit card, you know. And I think what happened was people got in too deep and they got accustomed to living on credit, you know, and the savings rate uh, is, you know, virtually non-existent. The thing that boggles my mind is I read a stat the other day that over 50% of people, if they had an emergency that cost over $400, would have to borrow the money.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. Yeah, that's pretty wild, you know. So I think, you know, we had what, in 2000 we had the dot-com crisis.
Yeah.
They got bailed out, and then we had what Enron took down the grid in 2008, and we had the mortgage crisis.
Yep.
You know, and then what do we have? What else do we have? We had well, the coronavirus.
Yeah.
I think coronavirus didn't really cause what happened in
It
2020.
showed that there was something wrong, though.
Yeah.
It was a really good test. It was a good litmus test of the health of the market, right?
Right. It was, yeah. And it really showed, you know, it showed where the flaws were, and it kind of accelerated things. You know, a lot of those jobs didn't come back. They'll never come back, you know, and people that had money made out pretty good. I mean, I think they created over 140 new billionaires just in this country.
Yeah.
So, you know, it worked out good for some, and for some it didn't. You know, but anyway, you know, it's like we keep having the same problems over and over again.
Yep.
And, you know, the wealth is being concentrated. this has been the biggest redistribution of wealth probably in the last 5 to 10 years that there's ever been in history. And eventually what happens is that, the middle class shrinks, the wealthy get wealthier, the people at the bottom are still at the bottom, but then there's nobody to buy the goods and services that are produced by the wealthy. So that's an unsustainable system. And
Right.
one thing I think the decentralized finance does, it kind of, like you talk about the reversal of ownership, you take back ownership of, your data, you take back ownership of your finances.
Yeah.
I just, the guy told me the other day, he said, "Oh man, this is a great country." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "God, I bought Dogecoin for 20 cents, man. It's up to 60 cents now. I tripled my money in a month." He said, "I think I may take a few weeks off." It's kind of a crazy way to make a living, because it's the way it goes up can also come down, but I think that's kind of antithetical to having a good, orderly society where you can plan, and I think everybody likes to, a job is more than just earning a living. It gives you a sense of purpose. It's funny, because I was at a meeting the other day, and the first thing people would ask, they say, "Hi, I'm so and so, and I'm so and so." It says, "Yeah, so what do you do for a living?"
What do you do? Right. Yeah.
So what do you do for a living? So it was like people are being, what you do is kind of like who you are, and if
It's
you
very,
do
yeah, it's
this
very much
right
closer.
here, and
Yeah.
the one guy was a data scientist, and everybody wanted to talk to him. So I guess he won the night.
Yeah, he's a gold scientist, right? I think that's an interesting thing too, because I think one of the things that bothers me the most as somebody who really cares about what blockchain does is that I see a lot of people taking advantage of this craze right now to tell people, quit your job, drop out of school, just live off of crypto, right? And I think the catch here is one, they're probably just trying to get money out of you, to fund their own lifestyle. But two, if everybody quit their jobs tomorrow or dropped out of school tomorrow, our society would collapse. The reality is that we still need workers. We still need nurses and doctors.
Mm-hmm.
We still need supply chain workers along every, part of the supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
We still need engineers. We still need data scientists. Like we still need all of these people to run our society, to maintain structure. And the reality is that maybe over the next 100 years, most of the working class jobs will probably be completely gone, right? And that is a major concern. What do we do about that? And I think this is where centralized government comes into play. We talk about blockchain reversing ownership of data and reversing ownership of your own finances and things like that. But governance is huge, right? And I think a lot of the things that we say sound very progressive, and that's really important because obviously this is a progressive thing for people and for quality of life. But one misconception is that progressivism is just big government, right? And I think, traditionally we've needed more government in terms of regulation to protect people. And we've seen what deregulation has done for people's stability and quality of life. We've seen how it's created, for example, richer billionaires over the course of the pandemic while millions of other people lost their jobs. But in the future, we don't need centralized government. I think both the right and the left in the centralized government right now just package their centralized power differently. They're not actually doing things. And this is where you were talking about, term limits and people being disconnected from everyday life. This is a real issue on both sides of that aisle in these government buildings because they're not educated on any of these subjects. They're not aware of what it's actually like to live in America for most people. And so how could they possibly be making good decisions, especially when most of their customers as politicians are the corporations that have interest in what they're doing for their regulation and for what they need to do. And so whether or not they're on the right side, branding it one way, or on the left side branding it another way. The fact is that we need major change regardless of that side of the aisle. And I think that's why I like the word progressive more than like, Republican or Democrat or right or left, because ultimately what we need is change, right? We need to change.
We need to move forward. Yeah, we need to move
forward.
Yeah.
And I think that's extremely important to consider. The governance of the future in a decentralized way doesn't have to be big government. Instead, it's government that we all own, right? And so it's that critical regulation that allows things to work. And it's the smart contracts of our everyday exchange. There's still the rules, right? We still need to have rules around what we do to avoid some people from getting too much power, from some people taking advantage of the system, to make sure that everybody's contributing equally, to make sure that certain like social things are protected, right? That people's rights and that they're still protected, that people still feel safe in society. These are important things that still need to be governed, right? We can't have absolute anarchy in lieu of cryptocurrency, right? But a lot of those intricate details of how government is run right now is very bloated, inefficient, and expensive. And if we can decentralize a lot of that, a lot of those like standard functions of governance, and we allow the governance of blockchain to work, we can have a very progressive system that's for the people. And it's instead of trickle down economics, it's trickle up economics, which works way better. But we don't have to have the bloated big government in the middle that's just going to screw it up, right? Because traditionally, bigger government, for the sake of being more progressive, hasn't worked very well. Ideally, it would, but we've seen plenty of instances, obviously, where it didn't, right? And so that's why the future with decentralization is also very exciting, is because we can also take ownership of our governance, allow the proper regulation, allow a government that works for us, because in this case, it's literally democratized to the point of being run by us in a distributed ledger.
And I think that's been one of the main problems, is that the powers to be don't really feel obligated or feel beholden to the voters.
Right.
I was helping a guy with a campaign the other day, and where he's running, only 44% of the people vote in special elections. So 44% of people vote. That means with 23%, you can become elected. So if you can get 1 out of every 4 people to go to the polls and vote for you, that's, it's less than 1 out of 4 people.
Yeah.
So that's more minority rule than majority rule,
Right.
One thing that I thought was interesting, I had an artist I work with in Australia. In Australia, everybody's mandated to vote.
Yep.
I say, what happens if you don't vote? It says, well, if you don't have a good excuse and you weren't in the hospital or had a car accident, it says you'll go to jail, or either you'll pay a huge fine. I said, like $300 or $400. No, like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. It depends on what you work. So everybody has to vote. I don't know. A lot of people wouldn't want that system here for obvious reasons, because 99% of the guys in office would be thrown out of office. But I think
anytime there's any way to get more people to vote, I mean, obviously they throw a fit, right? They don't.
They throw a fit. They shouldn't vote. We don't want these people voting. We don't want them voting. And see, this is, I think this is where voting's going. And I've heard some rumblings. I haven't heard anything concrete, but blockchain.
Oh yeah.
Everyone has a voting number. It could be your social security number. It could be a block on the chain. Mm-hmm. You would fit in a block somewhere, and there would be no question of voter fraud. There's no voter fraud now. That's just a big lie. There's no voter fraud, but it would assure that everybody would cast a vote.
Right.
And I don't know if you have to make it mandatory to vote. I almost think you do have to make it mandatory, so people can learn the issues and get involved, and they have to vote.
I think if you want to benefit from the system, this is how a lot of DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, work. Your participation as a node, as somebody staking, whatever your role is in the organization, you have certain responsibilities. And if you don't fulfill those responsibilities, you're replaced, right? Like there's something called proof of stake with delegation too, which is a kind of proof of stake, but it has delegates. And so there's even democratization baked into the design of a lot of decentralized protocols. And in order to participate in the system, you have to, in order to benefit from it, you have to participate properly. You have those checklist things you have to do. Um, so imagine a system where you do have some sort of like voting token that's distributed to you, or you have some sort of vote that you just have to, a smart contract you have to fulfill, right? This is critical to organize. I mean, imagine like a board of directors that won't vote on an issue. Like like imagine a board of directors who's they're individually directly affected by that vote, and they're like, nah, I'm good, I'm apathetic. Like you're getting a new board of directors. Like these guys don't, they obviously don't care about the organization, so you're either in the organization and care about it, or you're not in the organization, right? And that's how society has to work. If we allow too many people to not participate, and we almost encourage that apathy, we end up in very bad situations, right? We end up in situations where the only people who care enough to do something about things are those who are power hungry and greedy, and who know that there's something that they can individually reap from a system where nobody's watching, right? And that's a terrible situation. So decentralization does offer very secure, it's transparent, fully transparent voting, but fully anonymous at the same time, right? That's the benefits of blockchain. It's immediate. So imagine not having to wait up all night waiting for different counties to submit their votes. It would be immediate upon voting. And there wouldn't be any confusion or any sort of like anxiety. Like everybody would know what the result was, and it would be completely fair and democratized. And everybody would have to participate, and it wouldn't be cumbersome, it wouldn't be confusing, and that's ultimately the benefit of it. Of course, the Democrats kind of ruined it for us, where they tried to even use like a basic app this time, and like that clearly fell through in Iowa. And so people are very uneasy about using technology, because in their head, we learn about data breaches every day almost, and so the public has gotten this idea that technology in general is very vulnerable. That even their own banks and their own, obviously, governmental systems, these things are vulnerable because they're central points of vulnerability, right? They're centralized institutions who have, they're too complex, but they're in one place, and that allows them to be vulnerable to attack. But if we decentralize it, our obstacle then is communicating to the public, this system, you don't have to understand the technical details, but how do we communicate that this system is really important, and we have to advocate for our leadership to push for it, because it's going to be more secure, it's going to be transparent, it's going to work easier for you, and it's not going to be vulnerable, right? How do we establish that trust? That's going to be a big obstacle.
Right. Well, I think people tend not to trust what they don't understand.
Right. Yeah.
And I think people have to be educated on what DeFi, decentralized finance, really means.
Yeah.
People, if you ask 10 people what is surveillance capitalism, it's probably doubtful that one could tell you exactly what it is.
Right.
It's something that affects you every day. Surveillance capitalism is the monetization of your data. When you're on social media and your data is collected, your data is used to not just to advertise, but to manipulate the way you think and where you go. There have been several experiments. You can look up Facebook contagion experiments. The Pokemon Go we spoke about previously. Pokemon Go. They said, "Oh, what a cute game! We're gonna find Pokemon." But what Pokemon Go was, there was a game underneath the game by Google, and what Pokemon Go was, it was the development of being able to take people and place them where you want to place them. I may be looking for a car pretty soon, and I'm quite sure, that they'll probably place me in a dealership or give me reason to go, but it's very appealing to an advertiser, when they say, because they collect all kinds of data. They know, they collect data from your bank. They collect data from what you scroll through while you're online. They connect data by what you do with your cell phone. And, this data can be packaged and sold to someone who wants to sell you something, and also it can be, you can control or you can manipulate how people feel. What the contagion experiments were is that they found that on social media, that you can take the way one person feels and transfer it to somebody else by putting certain things on their feed. They can say, I can say, oh man, Alex is a pretty cool guy. And somebody else can say, no, man, Alex is a bad guy, man. He said, you watch. And then I start getting things on my feed that says Alex is a bad guy. And pretty soon I'm like, yeah, Alex is a bad guy. And he probably cheated on that election too, so surveillance capitalism is the monetization of your human experience and your data for the benefit of someone else. And it's already been used in 2 elections.
Right.
Obama used it first, and then Trump used it with Cambridge Analytica to
Got really unlucky with the
and see, the thing about it, when you talk about surveillance capitalism as a political tool, see, a lot of times in politics, you don't always have to get more votes. I don't have to always get more votes than you. I can just make your people not show up at the polls, and I can still win with the same amount of votes.
Yeah. Well, sentiment's everything, right? If you create that apathy, that dangerous apathy that causes people not to show up, not to like even be subtly excited about their candidate for 2 years leading up to the point of them having to show up to vote, and they wake up that morning and they're kind of tired, what's pushing them to even do it, right?
Why should I vote,
have a
man?
significant effect on
They're gonna pick who they want anyway. Why should I vote?
Right. What does my vote matter? They're all the same. I don't trust them, right?
Right. So
yeah.
So I think decentralized finance, blockchain, cryptocurrency, these things are here to stay. And I think with one of the things that really is a thorn in my side is when you look at the interest rate that you're getting on money from banks. I mean, you could put 50 grand in an account and maybe get 1 or 2%, while they're taking that same money and no telling how much they're making on it, because banks are into crypto now and they've done pretty good. Some of the coins have done pretty good. But you can reverse the ownership of how you invest your money, and how you tend to make out, So I think that's just one item, or one way that decentralized finance is not only, it's not only helpful, but it's inevitable almost.
Yeah.
We talked before about different economic systems. They all come on the scene. They last 300 or 400 years, and then they go away, and something else comes. And right now, it seems that decentralized finance, cryptocurrency, blockchain, this is coming on the scene. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think like the data element that you're talking about is huge, because we've definitely covered this subject a lot, but people don't even realize like the browser that you use is important. Like which browser you're using has a huge effect on the information about you that's being monetized. It's actually even more than your data being monetized. Like you as a person are monetized. Like you are the product, right?
Yeah,
like,
you are. Yeah.
Product being exchanged between entities that profit off of you doing your normal everyday things, right? Like, oh, you check your email and you do this, and companies like Google, Google is not just Google Chrome. Google has the underlying technology for a ton of other browsers, because Google has this thing called Chromium, and Chromium WebKit is this underlying technology that a bunch of other browsers use because they were too lazy to write their own. um, and so, like one couple of the only few browsers that don't use it, Firefox, for example. Firefox is great because it uses its own called Gecko, and Firefox does not use your data as monetization and things like that. There's a browser called Brave, and interestingly enough, Brave is even more secure than Firefox, but it still uses Chromium under the hood. And so, Brave is decentralized, that you get compensated in BAT for advertisements you see using the browser.
Oh, okay.
And so Brave is very secure, but the funny
So they
thing,
don't actually steal your data. They pay. They steal it, but they
right.
pay.
You get compensated for your data, but it's funny because it's still using Google's technology under the hood, and of course, Google's business model is you. And so this is really important. I mean, this is a huge discussion right now with Apple. Apple in their newest iOS release, I don't know if people have been noticing this, but it asks you permission now for apps like Facebook and Instagram, and even like Words with Friends asked me yesterday. I was like, is it cool if we like use your data from other apps? And I'm like, no, I literally just I play Words with Friends. Like, why do you need to know what I'm buying, And it's because Words with Friends business model is not just you buying power-ups or whatever, like Words with Friends business model clearly is advertising then. And so, iOS is doing that now. It doesn't mean that Apple's innocent, right? Because Apple is also building business models around your data. The new Apple tags, air tags.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the play with air tags, which I think is really interesting, because air tags are kind of marketed as this like tile replacement of like, you can put it on things so that you don't lose it. So you can put it on a bag or something.
What is it really? Tell us, what is it really?
So the underlying business model of AirTags is because Apple wants to expand their Find My blank product, their network. Because here's what happens with AirTags. Let's say somebody steals your bag at the airport, and that AirTag is now connecting to 6 other iPhones. Or let's say it's in a car with the people who stole your bag, and there's 3 iPhones in that car, 2 iPhones. Now that AirTag is communicating with other iPhones, and it's telling you, oh, your bag's no longer with you. Here's where your bag is. What it's doing is it's creating these like almost it's almost like a router in the middle now that creates this broader network of where everybody's devices are at all times and whose things belong to who to begin with. It's creating a huge like connection of data for Apple, expanding their Find My iPhone, Find My my MacBook kind of line. And I think that's the bigger play there, because the AirTag itself is not like some modern Marvel engineering. It's kind of thick, actually. It uses like a cheap battery in it. The tiles are thinner, so like it's not even a technological advancement from Tile. The technological advancement here is the Find My software suite, that network, because things like Tile don't have that, obviously. So this is the interesting thing, is that all these companies, their real business models are not even the hardware itself half the time. It's literally just your data.
It's the data, yeah. That data is where the money is. And this is something that I found out. I know someone that went to California, got hired by Google to drive one of the cars around, and they fly you out there, and then you drive the car back, and then you just drive it around. And that's kind of like his job. He just drives around all day and collects data. But what I didn't know was that, when the car goes down the street and you say, well, they're just taking pictures of the houses and everything. Well, you know what else they're doing? They're also checking the Wi-Fi.
The Wi-Fi. Yeah. You can look up entire maps.
So they come by your house, and your Wi-Fi is their Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Kind of like when you walk in an airport, when they come by your house, your Wi-Fi is there, and they're just collecting your data.
You can look up your Wi-Fi right now on public maps. There's public Wi-Fi maps of everybody's Wi-Fi networks. You can look it up right now, and you can pinpoint your Wi-Fi network name and where you currently are. So this is one thing I always suggest too. You should not name your Wi-Fi network with your full name, let alone your name at all, because it's completely public what the name of your network is.
Yeah.
So no matter where you are with your phone, if you have like, your phone is a wireless device, right? So if you call your phone Alex Jules iPhone, and this is available, it's visible on these public network maps.
You kind of know where you are. Yeah.
Somebody could easily look up where I am at all times because I'm carrying a transmitting device with me everywhere I go, you know?
And then if they see that, you know, Robert Vaughn's device and Alex Jules' device were together when 2 hamburgers got stolen, then the cops would probably know who did it. You know?
Well, yeah. How do you think
They
police
say, well, these guys love hamburgers and they were together. That's how they bust all the criminals now, by the way.
The hamburglers. But yeah, that's how they solve a lot of crimes now. They don't even need to leave their computer because they can look up where somebody's network was, where it was last pinged. And it's, you know, I don't know. Criminals seem to have not figured this out yet because they keep taking their phone places with them. But you know, like I wasn't there, and they're like, yeah, we literally see that you were there at this exact time.
A lot of times, and they do this with the you know, with the scanners with your car. And see, most cars now have Wi-Fi, so they give off a signal that can identify that particular car, you know, where it's at and where it goes. Because you know, it always amazed me how, you know, this guy will commit a murder in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and he'll drive to Doral, Florida.
This car's like, yeah, we went to Florida.
As he pulls up, they're waiting on him. You know, I'm like, well, they've been tracking him all the way. You know, they've been tracking the car all the way, and
40 CCTV cameras in between. You know, and I mean, the Wi-Fi protocols of the future. I don't think anybody's really heard about this yet outside of tech circles. The Wi-Fi protocols of the future, within the next 5 years, probably. They're already developed essentially. They can tell just by your Wi-Fi network where you are in the room. So I can make a gesture, like my router's over there. So like, let's say I wanted to like communicate with a smart device and I had like a setting set up to like turn that on or off. I could make a gesture and my Wi-Fi signal itself, because it's so short wave in these protocols, could recognize my hand signal and do something as a result. Like, that is really cool. But it's also another major security risk, right? It's a major security risk. And it's more than that. It's another way for people to make money off of you. Which room do they spend the most time in? Which devices are they interacting with?
Yeah.
You know, what are they doing at all times in their house? And how do we understand that? How do we analyze that? And how do we market to them better because of it?
And why does there need to be a microphone and a Nest thermostat? You know, and I tell you what freaked me out, this has happened a few years ago, was that when you walk in an Apple store, you know, and this is before the pandemic, but you walk in an Apple store and they're pretty good sized stores, and there's a lot of people in there. Most successful franchise, I think, in the history of the world. I mean, the retail franchise, it's like a money machine, you know, except for Las Vegas. I think they're probably number one. But you can be in an Apple store anywhere. You got an appointment at 10 o'clock and the guy will walk right up to you and say, "Good afternoon, Mr. Vaughn. You're here about your iMac, and we've done some tests on it and blah, blah, blah." I'm like, how in the hell did you know I was even in the store, more or less where I am? But they have that for your phone, you know, and they do it because I always try to figure out. I said, there's got to be a couple hundred people in here. How did he know where I was?
No.
So, you know, like you say, you know, it's taken on a whole new meaning, you know. So this is what we mean by the gold standard being replaced by the data standard.
Right.
And, you know, it's a little bit about education. I mean, if you don't really understand what's going on, you know, it seems almost like magic, you know.
You can't consent to it, right?
You consent to it.
You can't properly consent to things when most people don't even know these things are happening. And these are just a few examples, right?
Right.
Every fiber of our existence at this point has been monetized to some degree. And, you know, most people don't know nearly enough to be consenting to the fact that to those things to happen. I mean, that's a major concern, right? Even if we left things as centralized and we still had central companies that profited off of our data, we should at least strive for people to be able to be knowledgeable enough and informed enough, and there must be enough transparency for people to safely consent to those things, and we're not anywhere near that yet.
Right. Well, I think that's why they do it without your knowledge, because if you knew what they were doing with your data, you would never consent to it.
That's why Facebook's suing Apple, right? Because Facebook's
Yeah.
like, we're going to lose all of our advertising.
They are.
We're going to not consent to it.
Right. That's right. But I think that's what transparency is all about. Obviously with blockchain, a lot of things. Blockchain has a lot of different applications, and I think one of the main benefits is transparency, like you said. It's the ledger is there for everybody to see. And I think Facebook's going to take a serious hit from Apple.
Yeah.
Because who's going to say, oh yeah, I want you to have all my information.
Yeah. Let's let Mark track every purchase that we make.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what it's going to do is going to cause more people to buy iPhones too. So it's kind of a slick marketing gimmick, but it also is good in a way, Yeah. Yeah, because I would imagine a lot of people, if they're on the fence, if they're looking at Apple and saying, well, we don't track you like Android does. Facebook can't track you on your iPhone like they can on your Android. So that may be, that may be a benefit, I think, monetary benefit to Apple. But, how about Facebook's board? Hey, they got funded to the tune of about 150 million bucks, and they're supposed to make decisions on, independent of Facebook. And typically, I guess,
unbiased decisions.
Yeah, unbiased, so I don't know. Obviously, the data surveillance capitalism can't continue the way it is. So where do you see it going? I think, blockchain is sort of like the surveillance capitalism killer. Would you agree with that?
I don't know if I think it's the killer of the lack of transparency. I think the reversal of flow, I think plenty of people have no problem with their data being used, right? If I'm getting advertisements that are improved based on my data, maybe they're more useful to me. Maybe I do want to see like a new product or like a new clothing brand or something, right? Like that's not necessarily a bad thing. What's a bad thing is if I don't know, right? If I haven't consented to the data.
It's done without your knowledge, yeah.
Right. Because that can be harmful, right? Like your example of in the political space, like, it's not always sunshine and roses and new clothing brands, right? When your data is misused without your consent, without your knowledge, that can actually be, very harmful. And we've seen several examples of that. And so, what blockchain offers us is not necessarily, data is not going anywhere, right? We're still going to have a very data-driven economy. It's still going to be the gold standard, but our ownership of the data is going to change, right? We're going to maintain ownership of our data. For example, like every actual decentralized platform that I use, let's say the NFT platforms, like Rarible. When I just update when I'm like intentionally updating my bio, my MetaMask pops up and I still have to manually sign. It's called signing. I'm not physically signing, but you still have to sign each change. So I'm signing the fact that I'm updating my own data, even when I'm the one making the change. So, that's the kind of like, that's a good example. It's a really simple example.
Right.
And that's the kind of example of like, in a decentralized world, let's say on these platforms right now, where like I'm updating my profile on something, I have full ownership over that process, and I'm still manually signing that outside of the platform to say that's okay. That's an okay change with my data. I meant to do that.
Okay. Okay.
So now there's going to be ways that we can make that more seamless. you
Right.
know,
Right.
some people may find that a little cumbersome, but that's the level of security we have to have around our data when it comes to really important things. Imagine your healthcare records, right?
Mhm.
Like imagine being able to access those, manage those, see them, have the transparency over them. Like right now I can sign, there's this thing that I use for my doctors called My Chart, and I can log in and I can see maybe my messages, my bills, in process. I can see like test results maybe. But let's say I move to like a new hospital system, and now those hospital systems can't, it's very hard for them to share data between each other. Maybe there's a third party, there's like some other, like one doctor's office I used to go to didn't have a system at all. And so they weren't always in sync with this. And so, like, let's imagine that all of that data right now that's in very specific platforms was fully owned by me in a decentralized ledger for my healthcare data. And I could make all of my own decisions on which hospital system needs to get it. And I could do it immediately, right? Immediate settlement of data sharing, data retraction, making sure that transparency is there, that efficiency is there, and it's fully owned by me, right? That's a powerful future.
Right. Right. And I think this is one instance when I think, um, obviously less government is desirable, but there has to be some government regulation. And I think this is one instance where, I could see government regulation in terms of data, you owning your own data and giving someone permission to access your data.
Right.
Healthcare records, divorce proceedings, whatever, it's your data and it shouldn't be in the public domain.
Well, imagine if we didn't have HIPAA even. HIPAA's not perfect, but imagine if we didn't have HIPAA and you have a bunch of these obviously corporate entities that manage our healthcare system. Imagine all of the hidden places your data would be sold. It might be anonymized in the process, but imagine all of the money people would be making off of your healthcare data, your private, personal, sometimes traumatic healthcare data that would be, it would be for sale. You'd have no idea.
Insurance companies now, they don't have access to our healthcare data, but there's a database of the medications you take.
Yeah.
They have access to. So when you get an insurance policy, they can see what they might as well have access to it because they see what medication you're taking.
Yeah.
And that's another instance, of your data being, sold to the highest bidder.
Yeah. And they claim it's for useful things like, oh, we need that data to make good decisions on which things we cover, right? Which is like a half-assed way of saying we're not going to cover a bunch of other things that people need still. It's actually just like it's an easy scapegoat for them to skirt around the fact that they're profiting. They're able to make more money off of you and off of your employer. They're able to make more money off of, other providers and things like that by using that data. That's the only reason they care about that data. They don't care about that data because it helps you.
It makes more money. And I think, I don't know, healthcare delivery as a profit creating entity is something I have a problem with.
Yeah, it's a major conflict of interest, isn't it?
It's a major conflict of interest. And that's what healthcare drives most of our inflation. It drives the costs. It depresses our GDP. I mean, the amount of money spent on healthcare is just mind-boggling. And it does. That's why people say, well, I can go to Canada and get this $300 prescription for $27, or I can get a liver transplant. It costs $800,000 in New York.
Yeah, medical tourism.
Yeah, I can go to India with the same doctor.
World.
Yeah, with the same doctor for $12,000. They get the same thing.
You can have a vacation at the same time and still spend a fraction of what you spend.
A fraction, yeah. So I think that's something too that blockchain would be able to. If I need a implant, I should be able to pick my own dentist. I should be able to look on the blockchain and see what the going rate is, and that should be the rate. And I should be able to see what his experience is, and what his results are. And I think a lot of times when you see ads, a lot of data gets fudged. But I think with the blockchain, it could, like you say, it could keep a lot of things much more transparent. I think, which benefits everybody.
Or when you do Google searches, right? Because Google is not again, it's not just a search engine. Google is an advertising company, and so let's say you Google search, top nephrologists in Chicago. Like your first several articles, they may be paying ads, and even the lists of doctors on those pages themselves may be ads. And so the whole first page might literally just be people that are paying for you to see those results based on that Google search, and it's not genuine. And so you could end up going to a doctor for something very serious simply based on who paid the most for advertising.
Yeah. Not who's the best doctor.
That's not, this is healthcare, right? This is like somebody surviving, their survival rate of a procedure, of seeing the right doctor, of getting the right medications. And it's all driven by advertising. Like that seems wrong, So
blockchain would solve that problem too.
Right.
Because all that information would be entered and it would be verifiable.
Right.
If this doctor did, 800 cataract surgeries and everyone was perfect, and another doctor did 900, but 250 of them didn't work out. So that's information you need to have.
Very different economy, right? It's not an economy that's pegged against us, using us, but it's an economy that is built by us for us, right? That's true democratization.
Right. So I think, just to kind of wrap, I think the first thing is going to be to educate people, and I've tried to educate myself. You work in the field, so that's kind of like what you do. But, I think, people should try to educate themselves on DeFi, what decentralized finance really is, and understand it. Not so much, we're so accustomed to, how can I make money with this,
Right.
But there are other implications, that it may have for you. That may be more important than just making a few bucks. I think, when you talk about decentralized finance and blockchain, cryptocurrency, I think it's going to kind of turn society upside down, man.
Yeah.
There are going to be a lot of things changing, and people who are in power really do not like change. So you already are starting to see the pushback against cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
First, what was it? Investment banking house in New York. They got rid of their crypto department, then they bought it back. That wasn't who was that? There was some big investment house 6 months ago got rid of their crypto department, and then 2 months ago they brought it back. Yeah. So there's been pushback, but I think everybody is pretty admitting to themselves now that blockchain and crypto and DeFi is here to stay. So
yeah.
Well, that's about all I got for tonight. Obviously, this is an extensive subject, and we're not going to cover it all in 1 hour, but hopefully we've answered some questions. And also the DeFi Collective at gmail.com is our Gmail address. That's DeFi Collective, the DeFi Collective at gmail.com. And we'll, certainly if we don't have the answers to questions, we will find out for you, because I want everybody to get familiar with the word DeFi, decentralized finance, because you're going to hear about it more and more. It's part of blockchain. It's connected with cryptocurrency. It's related to surveillance capitalism. So these are terms that you're going to be hearing more and more about, and they're not going anywhere. A
lot of overlap here. Yeah.
I had my great uncle. He's just like, computers was just a fad, man. He said, this stuff will be gone in a couple of years. He said, the computers, the internet, he said, that stuff will, he said, I've seen it come and go so many times. He said, it'll be gone. But, he was wrong. and just like DeFi, blockchain, cryptocurrency is here to stay.
He wasn't
So
wrong about the cycle of change, though.
yeah, he wasn't wrong. Yeah, yeah, things will change. They
Yeah.
will change. So it's best to if you can. How's that saying go? You can swim farther if you go with the current. If you swim with the current, you can get a lot farther and use less energy than if you kind of go against the flow. So, okay, well, thanks for joining us and letting us into your homes. Any closing thoughts, Alex?
I just wanted to say, like, people are comparing what's happening right now a lot to the dot-com bubble. But ultimately what the dot-com bubble proved is that there was significant underlying technology that obviously changed our lives, right? And so there's going to be a lot of market excitement. There's going to be a lot of even like scams and things that try to take advantage of you or distract you. And a lot of those things are complete, rubbish, right? But like at the end of the day, the underlying technology, the things that, we talk about on the show that are really important and have huge implications for you and society, those things are here to stay, right? And those are the important things that we want to make sure you understand. And so, like you said, don't focus too much on the dollar signs and getting rich quick. Realistically, you're still going to have to work a job. You're still going to have to be educated. These are realistic life things, right? But also realistically, you're going to be way better off if you educate yourself and care about what this stuff does and what it does for you and what it does for the world. And so that's, ultimately our goal here. So thanks for joining us for another show.
All right. So until next week, stay safe, wear your mask, and don't take any wooden nickels or wooden crypto, I guess.
Yeah, no wooden Bitcoins.
No wooden Bitcoin, yeah. All right. Good night. Have a great evening.